Hey now, how it do today? And Kmar here with our season finale of Working with Attitude. This is episode 16, and I'm joined today with Season George from Five Sisters Farms.
Hi.
Thank you for being here. It's such a wonderful experience to be able to learn about, your farm. I'm looking forward to hearing all about that. And this trellis program, you just recently received a grant from what I understand, and that's kind of why I reached out to learn more about that. And congratulations.
Thank you. It's been very exciting to be one of the first recipients of this pioneer program for Humboldt County. It is a micro grant application, and there's also an equity application that hasn't been quite developed yet, and then there's one more, I forget what the third one is. But this trellis program was developed by the Humboldt County Economic Development Committee. I guess it's a county leg. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I believe the funds were gathered and allocated from Measure S. And there were two, in the micro grant applications, there were two categories, an individual for $10,000 and an association for $50,000. And I was the recipient that got the 50, and I believe that there were 9 other farms that got the 10,000. Mm-hmm. And I was really happy to receive it. In the very beginning, there was a little bit of, because we were the first, there was more hoops I needed to jump through, of course, with this process. There's constantly new new things to overcome, because I was selected as a recommendation by the committee it's an appointed committee, and there were 71 applications and graded on a score, graded by points system. And they made the recommendation to the Board of Supervisors in May 19th, and it was approved. And when a few months went by and I hadn't heard anything from the department and I hadn't gotten any money or even an email, I was like, hey, am I still getting that money? And they were like, well, actually, once we looked at your application, we're not sure you're eligible. But my associations were too loose, and so I went back to the language that they had outlined in the criteria, and I said, well, it doesn't say that here, and maybe I'm misunderstanding, but I believe that the recommendation was approved, and that's a court of law, that's a hearing that happens, and it's going to take more than an email for me to accept 10,000 rather than 50. So please give me the opportunity to show that I am eligible and tell me whatever I need to do in order to receive the award that I was recommended for. Because, if I were to take 10,000, what piece of my application would I choose to allocate $10,000 to? $10,000 wouldn't cover the project that was recommended.
You almost had to make the effort to receive this grant more than once then, it seems.
100%. And, it was kind of everything through this process of compliance I think everybody's become stronger and really more determined. And the people who have come through it really are the people who are positive they have a seat at the table and they want to be there, because, it's never been easy to do what we've done, and this is just making it even more challenging.
Now, am I correct that this is tax revenue from the cannabis industry being returned to develop
to make sure that these small farms actually have a chance to stay viable?
Well, that's really fascinating. That is really great that the local, the county and so forth is really putting emphasis back into making sure that the efforts that are, I know what type of efforts are involved with compliance and have all the difficulties that have of you legal farmers now have had to, all the hoops and hurdles and jumps you've had to make to get to that point. It's great that there is at least this program in effect.
Yeah, I was, really excited that they made it available, and I had a lot of encouragement to participate in it. And I actually wrote my application in 2 hours, like the day of the deadline. like somebody, I was going through a rough time, and a friend of mine said, "Hey, Susan, did you get your application in? It's the deadline's today." And I drove over to my sister's house and knocked on her door, we have to do this. And she was so helpful and so encouraging, and I wrote it in such an emotional, okay, we're gonna do this. This is gonna be awesome. And then when I read it afterwards, I was a little bit oh my God, that I was emotional when I wrote this. It is so. Well, somebody told me when I had sent out the application to a bunch of people so they can familiarize themselves to write me a letter of recommendation for it, and they were like, "Wow, Susan, you really wrote a ballad there." And I was like, I guess I did, but that's what moved the committee to recommend me.
And what kind of project did you propose?
For me, okay, so my farm is very small. Originally, I'm in the pre-existing, and originally they were having a hard time verifying my square footage. And so they were going to, I was so good about putting my hoops up and down before Reggae. I border the Reggae on the River property. So I was really good about putting them up and down fast, and they couldn't get a picture of it. I brought in pictures of myself. I was like, this is me winning a horseshoe tournament in front of my hoop house at July 4th. I was able to be like, this is it. Look, here it is. And they couldn't verify it. And so they actually weren't. The lady Portia, when I went in, she was like, "Susan, I couldn't verify it, so I was actually going to kick you out of the program." And John Ford, it was literally a big cross through her recommendation with his signature saying, "We're going to give her 1,500 square feet." And at the time, I was like, "Yes, I made it!" And then afterwards, I was like, 1,500 square feet is a freaking death sentence. It's like that was. I don't think anybody expected anybody to keep going. With that amount.
That was
1,500 square feet of cultivation space.
Was not enough room for what you wanted?
I was applying for the smallest amount, which is 5,000, but, so for me, I knew they gave me 1,500, which was, a good starting point. And now I've been able to eke it up to 3,000 now. And, but at the time, I knew that I really had to diversify my property. And that the cultivation part, it wasn't going to be enough for me to maintain, buying my property. So I jokingly said to people, "Oh, I'm gonna have tours. I'm gonna have camping, and I'm gonna start charging people to look at the weed before they buy it." As a joke, just putting it out there, ha ha ha, what am I gonna do? And then that is ended up what I've done. So I really promoted my property as a sort of welcome center. I'm right on the county line. I'm right on Highway 101. My house is like a cute little cottage with a big wraparound porch. I have this, classic giant barn. And so when people come to Humboldt, we have the One Log there. We have Richardson Grove. I have this little neighborhood of, a dispensary, the state park, and now people are camping on my, so for me it was, in order for me to survive, I would like to have a welcoming center. I'd like to give tours. I want to promote my farming practices. I want to be the example of the mom and pops that really started Humboldt, of the Humboldt cannabis industry. What a garden would look like back in the 70s and 80s, and not so much like a hoop house with depths and not an industrial grow, but more of a holistic garden. And the people who come on tours, who have gone from tour to tour, and when they get to my place, they're like, "Oh my God, I just came from 3 different greenhouses that pretty much all look the same, and this is a garden." There, and you know how crazy it is for me to hear people be like, what, weed grows outside in the dirt in a garden? Like, people are like shocked about, like, there's people who work in the industry, they're like, I've never seen a plant outside of a warehouse.
This is one of the things that I think was so unique about finding your farm, and I'm certainly going to include photographs and so forth, but it did appear that you were doing more of a demonstration garden, and there was things besides just the marijuana being cultivated. And why don't you tell us a little bit about the distinction in your farm and some of these other more, almost, I don't want to call industrial, but more commercial sized grows?
Well, and, first of all, a lot of people say, like, demonstration garden. What does that even mean? Like, what is a demonstration garden? And
I think this is a great opportunity for you to tell us all about
right.
that.
I think people have gone to a Pioneer farm and watched the lady churn butter, and then like the blacksmith guy.
We have that here with Blue Ox.
Yeah, it's like
Eureka.
so. Like, people see, people definitely take primitive, skills workshops. People want to do farm to table. How to dry loose leaf teas, how people want to learn these things, and rather than learning them on YouTube or reading a book about it, it's a way more effective to give people an opportunity to experience it. And a lot of people who are first time gardeners, they don't want to take the time, investment, space, labor. They don't really want to just start from the beginning and not know what the outcome will be. So if for someone, so I have hosted many community gardens through a nonprofit I worked for many years ago, and we there just gave people an opportunity to come and garden with us and be able to take home produce. We would make a lunch, and that is food for the soul. It is good exercise. It gives people a skill. It gives people healthy food. For me, it's a lot of people don't have that access or the skills or the resources that I have, and so but I still want everybody to feel good about gardening. So, and to allow them to come to my place and try it out, see how easy it is. I'm teaching people how to grow what I'm trying to sell to them, which is, a pretty far out concept to most entrepreneurs.
Yeah, that's a different business model than ordinary, and I think that's a really awesome distinction. I think that so people can actually come and they could find out how to grow some pot themselves.
Well, and not only grow pot, but they could grow food with the pot, with the flowers, and honestly, it's not going to piss their neighbors off, because you don't have to throw up a hoop house in the middle of your backyard that's going to be an eyesore to your neighbor and have lights going. It's like such a takeaway for the average homeowner to come to my place and see it as a beautiful landscape, as a totally diversified polyculture landscape, rather than an industrial grow with bright lights and a hum. It's like people are very, I'm surprised at how surprised people are that it just, I've literally heard people say, like, it just grows in the dirt. It's like, yeah, it's a plant.
Taking pictures and sending it to
yes, it's like,
to their
what,
relatives.
for me, it's like, I've been in the horticulture industry my entire adult life. My mom's a horticulturalist, so I forget, how saturated and how natural it is for me to be in a garden and get the work done. To me, it's not hardly work. It's like a rhythm. It's like vacuuming or something. Like, it's not like a huge task to vacuum your place. You just vacuum it. It's like, for me, it's not. I don't have to, like. To me, it's this. As I walk by, I'm doing. It's not. And people are really. It kind of demystifies it, I guess, in a way, for people to see, like, oh, this is just one woman out here taking care of all of this, and look at how much fun she's having.
And this is something that people can do through something I'm learning from you as well, called High Camp.
It's Hip Camp.
Hip camp.
Hip camp, yeah.
Okay, I thought it was high camp.
That's probably why you're not finding it.
That explains it.
Yeah, Hip Camp is it's an app similar to Airbnb for camping, and really, we see in my grant application, I was proposing. I've always, from the very beginning of my original cultivation application back in 2015, listed tourism and farm tours on my application for cultivation. And at that time they said, you have to take that off because we don't have a land use, or we don't have a permit for that. That's going to be a separate permit. You don't get to do tours while you're cultivating. No, and then since then they're like, you need to have paved walkways, you have to have an ADA bathroom, you have to have a 40-foot turnaround for a bus, you have to have, you have to be on an improved road for it. I mean, so now they have the regulations, and luckily I'm like one of the only farms that qualify, being on Highway 101. I have a giant circle driveway, like this grant application is building the ADA bathroom. I know enough about community gardens. I knew that my pathways had to be wide. I had already put the road base down. I had already, it's like I was pretty much prepping myself for this transition into tourism, and now they just recently came out with the tourism permit, and the first one was just granted, not to me, but to a different farm, just like 2 weeks ago. And so I know I'm on I was operating before the county had even set up the parameters, and my loophole was Hip Camp. And because Airbnb was happening, they knew, I was pretty clear about what I was doing. And because this Hip Camp gives me insurance, it's a third party, it was like Hip Camp was my loophole. And for me to have, and Hip Camp was very much aware that it was a cannabis farm too. I was very surprised that they were so willing to work with me.
And some people aren't coming there primarily for that. They just don't seem to mind that that's the case.
In the very beginning, I did not list on my Hip Camp profile, did not say it was cannabis farm. It said that it's a permaculture farm. And once people make the inquiry to book with me, at that point I would say to them, are you comfortable with it being a cannabis farm? And I would say about 2% said no. Most people were like, what? Oh my God. Most people were just like, this is amazing. Like, they could not believe that was like a total bonus to
wow.
And then a lot of people were like, yeah, we don't care, but we're not interested. And see, the way that my yard is set up, it's like the garden is like paramount. Like, you have to walk to get to the shower, from the campsites. You have to like walk right through and up and down past the cannabis garden. It's just beautiful out there with the flowers and everything. And so there's no way, if somebody wants to camp in my yard and they're not comfortable with it, there's no way that they can really like avoid it. And it got more, the more people, as it went on throughout the summer, I said, I would tell people, okay, it's a cannabis garden, are you okay with that? And they were like, girl, have you read your reviews? Have you seen the pictures people post? And I hadn't. They were like, dude, you should read your reviews, because people are like, can't believe she let us in her cannabis garden. And I realized, after a while, the clientele started coming for the garden, and actually offering me, like, a couple times. There's been 2 people who said, hey, can we pay you $20 and we can pick your brain while we have coffee? But a lot of people are like, will you give us a tour? And I'm like, it's an open tour. You're allowed to, check it out. And then if somebody really wants to pick my brain a lot, then
are there people that ask if they can water? Or
no, I don't let anybody do any gardening.
Right.
That's for sure. And I really, I let them take pictures. I definitely let them harvest food out of there. But as far as the cannabis, I don't want people really touching them that much, just because contamination thing, they're there to look at. And that's another reason why it's like, I don't really net my plants. I don't put it in a bunch of ugly bamboo. My plants, so many people, even within my own community, they come over, they're like, whoa, your plants are just, you don't put any cages around them. People are like, girl, you need to put cages. And I'm like, I do this on purpose. You know, like, this is like, I have told people, I'm like, these girls are supermodels. They're being photographed all the time. Like, they have to be in their natural state. And just for people
That's
to
so
see them
great.
in their natural state is like mind blowing to even people in my own community, which I'm like, what is wrong with this? If people are like, oh my God,
Do
you
you
don't
f-
cage your plants, you know?
Do you think the caging or netting actually increases yield, or?
You know, because I have my garden is watered through rain catchment, and I had so little storage that I almost dry farm my farm. It's like, so my plants aren't huge. I plant late in order to save that water. I plant pretty late, and then I almost stop watering like 2 or 3 months. Just, I water so little. And the hugelkultur mounds are big, are the thing that I believe allows me to do that. But I don't grow monster plants anymore because I don't have unlimited amounts of water.
And that was something that came from your previous experience as well,
What?
water conservation?
Well, yeah. So my first job ever, right out of college, was on the Cuyamaca College campus, and the water district that sold East County, San Diego, our water, which is huge. You know, San Diego's the most landscaped city, maybe besides Vegas, you know, but massive amounts of water and money to municipal landscaping. And so this water district, they must have got a grant, or they must have got some sort of funding, because it was like millions of dollars for this super fancy demonstration garden. So that was my first experience of a demonstration garden, was the Helix Otay Water District Water Conservation Demonstration Garden. So during my class, they were building this garden, so we got to participate in the building, and then I got the first like docent job, like the first caretaker job, and I was 17 years old. I started going to community college at 16. So I was 17 years old, working in this multi-million-dollar garden and teaching people how to save water. And that was the first time that I realized, like, here's a water district who's managing a very precious resource. And they sell that resource for money. And they are teaching their people who are buying that resource from them how to manage it properly. And I thought, that is a beautiful business model. That is a new paradigm business model. This is a responsible, ethical management of a resource that we all have to share. That we basically, San Diego steals all the water from the Colorado River, and then we just frickin' let it run down the street while they're overshooting the daylilies in the middle of the road. You know, it's like, and so this district was ready to put an end to that, saying, like, you have to plant xeriscape plants in the medians. You know, I mean, they were like majorly changing, because they're responsible for managing this precious resource of water, and they're realizing, like, dude, we don't have enough. We can't just give it away to these people for them to wash their cars all for an hour in their driveway. You know, I mean, there was like major crankdowns on the water when I was growing up in San Diego, and that garden was a really feel good way to educate the community on how to manage their resource. And so for me, I thought, I've implemented those same principles over and over again throughout my life.
And the DEM Pure Certification, does that have to do with demonstration
So
gardening or?
DEM Pure is the DEM is DEM,
Yes.
and it's Dragonflight Earth Medicine.
Oh, okay. So that's not short for demonstration. Okay.
And but in order to be certified through them, you have to have an educational component. And that's this is a peer certified certification, to where somebody like nominates you or you apply, and then you have a DEM Pure, somebody who's already certified, come to your farm and look at your cultivation practices. And what you're shooting for is 6 closed loops, and a number of different ethics. And once you become certified, you kind of make a promise. not kind of, you definitely make a promise that, you will continue to implement these farming practices and you will encourage them in your community. You will certify other farmers, which gets them to implement these sound practices. But it also, the biggest clincher, and this is like the thing, the most divisive, where people have wanted to get the certification, and I'm like, well, this means that you can't sell any of your flour to anybody who's going to make BHO oil, or it has to be solventless, it has to be, and they're like, what? No, I can't do that. And it's like, well, what's the point of being regenerative and
Growing
doing all this
organic
and then
weed.
selling it to somebody who's gonna, like, no, it's ethics all the way down. Like, this is how we create this coalition, this is how we set a standard, this is how. And it's pretty funny how it's like, well, I'll manage my farm the way this, but fuck, I'll sell it to the guy who's going to make BHO all day long. It's like, like that.
What is a closed loop?
A closed loop is where you're not bringing inputs, or you're not importing things off of, like, your farm is producing everything on site, basically. So I have rain catchment. I make all my own compost. I save my seeds. I'm growing my own food. I am the hugelkultur mounds. That counts as a closed loop, I guess, because we are taking carbon from our property limbs. We're really lucky to be in an area that has a lot of carbon. Leaves, wood. I'm able to just literally rake stuff up and just make piles. So therefore, I haven't bought bagged soil in, I don't know, maybe 7-8 years. It's like, I may buy, there's certain things, like, I like to buy some rice hulls sometimes, there's maybe some alfalfa meal, but over 5 years I might buy 150 pounds of inputs, and they're in the raw material form and hopefully sourced from within California. So it's like, it gets you thinking very deeply about what it is you're doing for the industry. Like, I remember working at Daisy's many years ago, and everybody started realizing, like, oh, guano is not good for, like, everybody, like, oh, I'm organic now, I use guano. Well, guano's not good. Like, the way it's harvested, it's actually not that great to be taking it from those islands and bringing it halfway around the world. It's like, the carbon footprint of our inputs is huge.
Sure.
So you think about the carbon footprint of the pot that you're producing on your farm, how much diesel, how much electricity and lighting, how much fans, and then you give that to somebody who's going to make a concentrate, and you're concentrating that oil down to, a dab. Mm-hmm. So you think about, you're concentrating all of that carbon footprint into one tiny little dab, and you think, like, oh shit, like, how can I be a hippie while I'm dabbing this shit all day long? It's like, be a hippie if you want.
The more that I have these interviews with you guys, the more naive I end up feeling, because I'm learning so much. I thought the trellis grant had something to do with the plastic netting.
Yeah.
I thought that was the trellis, that it was some sort of because I know that there's going to be environmental changes with using
CDFA. Not CDFW, Fish and Wildlife. They do not want you to use the plastic stuff. If you are gonna be permitted, they do not want you to use that plastic stuff. And so luckily,
it will be a thing of the past.
Honestly though, this is, and my friends made that jute trellis, and that is a biodegradable material that you can
So
compost
it's not like
end.
at the end during cleanup when you're getting balls and balls of plastic all rolled up after you're finished.
Well, and the thing they say it traps wildlife, and I honestly have seen a bird caught in it. I've released birds out of my trellis netting before, but the first couple of years that jute netting came out, I was really adamant until I was told that I could not use it anymore about reusing my plastic, because I was like, I don't want to throw away something that's perfectly good into the landfill when I put it on a cardboard dowel, and I roll it up and I store it in a bag in my barn. It's no mice are getting caught in that, no birds are getting caught, and it's rolled up and it's in a bag, it's in the barn. And I've been able to use that plastic stuff for like 5 years. And people are like, how do you get your weed out of there? It's like, just literally like, like lift, like, like jiggle it out of there. It comes right out. Like, I don't understand how people are like, you have to cut it out. How, it's like, okay, well, whatever, cut it out then, and don't reuse it. But I do.
The biodegradable then isn't plastic like I'm thinking of?
It's jute netting. So it's like twine.
Gotcha.
Which I was always, if you can look way back on my Instagram, I had this thing. It was like, take the time.
Would you like some tea?
No, thank you though. Take some time into twine. It was like, instead of using the plastic green stuff, that most people tied their plants up, I was always using the twine because I could compost it at the end of the year. And I think, for me working for a nonprofit that was an educational nonprofit, it really, and having so many people come to the garden looking for answers, not the garden I have now, but in the past, those other gardens, I realized that I was in a unique opportunity to really set an example and show people that there are options that aren't, a huge undertaking to implement, that it's easy to make these alternative choices. And so for me, it wasn't like a big hardship for me to make these changes, and I felt like it was more of a responsibility to show that you can have a regenerative, a lot of people are like, you can't have polyculture and a permitted cultivation, like that's like whimsy or whatever, like that's not to scale, you can never do that to scale. And I'm just like, okay, if you don't think, like, I'm gonna try, and I'm doing it, so I'm glad I tried. I'm glad I didn't listen.
You are obviously the most hands-on person there. Your sisters that are involved with you as well, I'm sure, are there to assist you.
My sisters, were definitely a big part of my transition here. My littlest sister came first, and she lived on the first farm I worked at, up in Windy Gap. She lived there with us. And then Chelsea, my middle sister, came, and she has her own little place, and she has a dental, she's like a dental technician, and so she has another career, and she recently just decided that she wanted to dedicate more time and be more involved with Five Sisters Farm, and it's just, she came in right when I needed her. Sierra, my littlest sister, she got a corporate cannabis job pretty early on when all of that popped up, and she's made a really good name. She's stayed at that job, and she's moved up, and I'm very proud of her. But she, she'll be very helpful in the processing center development with all of the SOPs and labeling criteria. I mean, she's now an expert in that, and she helps many, many farms in Humboldt County with her labels and things. So I'm really proud of her. And then the fourth sister, she's our adopted sister, who I grew up with on the same street, and it's actually her dad who owns the property, and has really, herself and her dad has been my major support, and I would never have been able to do any of this without their support.
You came up to Humboldt County with them the first time?
Yeah, but I had my horticulture degree, and I really came, I was really very happy in Florida at the time. I went to Florida to be with my grandpa, and I got busted and was on house arrest for 3 years there. And I ended up making a really nice time of it. Like me, I never let anything get me down. And so I started my own business. I worked for that nonprofit. I mean, at the very end of the house arrest, I got pregnant at the end of it, and had my daughter there in Florida. And then when I realized that I didn't want to raise my child in Florida, in North Florida, that is when I was looking for a transition to get back to California, because that's where her dad is from. Her dad and I met in high school, and so both of us were like California through and through, and we were kind of like we didn't fit in North Florida very well. And so I was ready to raise my child in California as I was raised. And I didn't expect to fall in love with Humboldt, and I certainly didn't expect to fall in line into the property that I'm in now. And, I'm just really grateful to be there now. It's like everything works out the way it's supposed to. I would have never, 10 years ago thought I'd be where I am now.
I have
Never.
to ask, was that first trip that you made up here the year that Ghetto Youth played and the whole tribe was on stage, all them Marley Brats?
Yeah, actually we were
That was
traveling with them. Amber's dad is friends of that crew, and so that was the first year I came, but he wasn't established here, and I didn't come to move until 2008. So I think that was like 2000 or 1999.
Yeah.
It was the Spirit of Unity tour.
I think so. There was one year where all of those brothers were on stage together, all in camo, just jumping so high and flags waving.
Actually,
when
all of them came, and Kamani and I wasn't at that one. There's a picture that Jesse has in the living room of that, and I wasn't at that concert. I was when Ghetto Youth was like. And Damien, like, nobody really knew him. He didn't have dreadlocks. His hair was like like this like curly hair like that. That's when I came in. So that might have been like 98 or something. It was pretty early on. Yeah. I think I was 16 years old. And so we had traveled with them, and we stopped at Desmond's house on the way up, and then we came to Reggae on the River. Everybody was camped already. And
that was the first spectacle that you saw in the county was that whole
and we arrived as like guests of the Marleys, and even though my boyfriend from high school, the same, my daughter's dad, he had caught a bus up there, so I was camping down with everybody, in the rocks, and Jesse and they were camped actually at the property I live in now. Before it was, he had no idea that he would be owner of that. It's just so amazing how life works out, because we were there as guests. Never in a million years would I have ever thought that I would be, a steward of that land like I am now. As when I came as 16, never in a million years did I ever put it together.
I mean, it wouldn't be proper any other way. I can't even imagine, like, you're utilizing and making that ground achieve its potential in a way that someone else certainly may not have. I think that what you have is primarily built
and from
your heart and soul.
Well, and I realize like all of the jobs I've had in the past has kind of prepared me for the position I'm in now, and really learning how to facilitate new people all the time in a community garden, learning how to be comfortable with teaching, empowering somebody to create the product that you're selling to them. Or to manage and preserve the product you're selling to them. It's like, for me, I have had an exposure to different methods of business, nonprofit work, and to me that has made me very adaptable and not afraid. I'm not, for me it's like it's a bigger message, and not necessarily, I don't want to be like the like the flashiest Humboldt girl or whatever. I'm happy just being myself on my farm and sharing it with people, and it's really the feedback I get from the people that I feel rich.
One of our bullet points here is more than just the product, that it's an experience, and so you don't seem to be just really focusing. I mean, I'm sure that you have we can all see the quality that you have. I'm sure your quality control is as high as anyone else's, and
it's just me.
but I'm just saying that I'm sure that this is world class, grade A, top shelf, as much as anywhere else, and yet you're also not making that necessarily a primary focus.
I feel like there's so many people who are getting, the angle of like, this is the best. I have like, I grew another 100 pounds of cookie, whatever.
This smells wonderful.
And I really try to grow those strains that nobody's heard of. I want to grow like my friend's strain that they made it. It's like, to me, I'm so small that I have such, and when I say small, I mean I have such little square footage that if I grew another 100 pounds of, that's basically almost all I could grow is 100 pounds a year, because I have such a small garden and I only have one harvest.
Well, I remember
and,
when that was the most achievable.
Distro doesn't even want to mess with me because I can't give them, like, CISO has a 200-pound minimum, and it's like, dude, I'm never
Really?
going to be able to work with these people because I'm so small. So therefore I have to have something that nobody else has, that sets me apart, that is super, like, that's what exotic is that nobody else has it. It's like, and it doesn't, and luckily I have enough confidence in my skills that I know I can turn out a decent product, and that I don't have to be like what's on the hottest trend or whatever. I can just grow what I want, what excites me, what my body is craving, whatever terpene profile, and then I grow so little of it that I only have to sell it to like 2 different people who just want to buy my stuff no matter what. So it's like, I'm not ever like trying to work with like a million different people being like, please buy my product.
Well,
please,
you said something that I thought was really great. Something to effect of most people say, "Go big or go home," and
I stayed home and went small.
well, I think that's pretty awesome. Thanks so much for bringing me some smoke and what did we what am I showing
This
people
is
here?
Ruthless Pineapple Skunk. And then
I smell the pineapple. For
yeah.
Sure.
So a lot of people, it's so funny because it's like, I have people, they're like, oh my God, this smell takes me back to high school. It's like, for one thing, I super like sativa dominant strains. Nobody's growing sativa dominant strains anymore, but maybe because I'm from San Diego and, my body is attuned to like Mexican weed that I like a sativa. I don't know. It
smells a little bit like Jack Herrera.
Yeah. And
right?
the Jack Terps are always there. And then people are like, Jack Terps.
Oh, I love it.
It's
like, actually one of my favorites.
It's like, I don't have, I'm okay with growing. I don't need everybody to love it. I really don't. It's like I have my little niche and I'm totally comfortable.
It sounds so fun.
It is. I've tried to keep it fun.
I mean, it sounds like you have like almost Valley Girl people show up being like, oh my God.
I totally do. And that is what I had to get really comfortable giving them the character that they were hoping to meet. It's like I still haven't read the reviews, but so many people, I can just tell, it's like literally they look at me like I'm a mystical unicorn. like people are just like, I see people's face. You know how little kids have that like Christmas morning face? I see adults get like that. I've seen adults just well up in tears. I've seen people just get so emotional being surrounded by that plant, that I am saturated with the community of people who now look at that plant kind of as a commodity, and it's not, and we're lucky here where there is still the spiritual element, there's still the medical element, there's still, and that's what I'm trying to keep alive, is that this is not recreational substance that should be lumped in with cigarettes and tobacco. This is a spiritual sacrament.
I like that. The garden and cultivating cannabis as a social change tool, you mentioned, was something that...
Well, my background in food sovereignty and that, like a community garden, empowering people to grow their own food, knowing where their food comes from, to know their farmer, to eat locally and seasonally, all of that was a social change movement, is a social change, and it's catching on. And when I worked for the nonprofit, it's called DEMAYAN, DAMAYAN, which is a Filipino word that translates to help others is to help yourself. That is the translation of that. And that organization, I worked for them from 2004 to 2003 to 2008. And that at that time, that organization was 15 years old already, which was way ahead of the green movement. It was very established. It had some philanthropists that really funded it, and it was, Tallahassee is actually zone 8. It's a really good area to grow vegetables. And I saw I was working with everybody on the economic scale. I was working for very wealthy churches, teaching them how to put in community gardens, how to can food, how to, stock their own food pantries, basically. And these are like, for me in my 20s, it was very strange teaching women in their 50s how to grow canned food and grow food. Like, to me, I'm like, you should be teaching me. It's like, so I was working with the very wealthy, and then on down to the south side where there was food deserts, and those children there ate mainly from dollar stores, box food, fast foods. So many kids didn't know what an eggplant or a radish was, never knew, like literally had never cut a vegetable, had never had eaten a raw carrot. These are the experiences. I'm working with children who don't have access to fresh food, and for me to see a child grow a radish, they would have never eaten a radish from the grocery store. If somebody put a radish on their plate, they would not eat a radish, but they pick a radish out of the ground that they sowed the seed of. They are so excited to eat that radish, and they're like, oh, that's spicy. But it's like, I just changed a kid's life.
You were telling me about the people that are coming there with Hip Camp, harvesting food out of the garden and tasting things and having a similar experience.
So that's a big draw to my garden or to my campsites, is that they are welcome to forage, which, people are like, I can't believe you let people just like in your garden. And a lot of gardeners are very protective of their garden, or like, and I really that's the first thing I say to people. It's like, I want you to feel really comfortable, take pictures, I have a list, like, this is what's ripe right now. And then they're out there making their breakfast from, eggs and peppers that they got. It's like they are really having that like back to nature experience. It's more than a camping experience. It's more than setting up a tent and sitting outside. It's a let's go on an adventure. I have a plant scavenger hunt that I want, and that the plant scavenger hunt is going to be a educational tool, because I can say, find these 10 medicinal plants in the garden, find these 10 culinary herbs in the garden, find these, and so they have a card, it has a description of the plant, and they go around and they find them. And so they are learning about what that plant does, they are identifying that plant, they are having fun with their partner. Right now I don't allow children on, because it just doesn't make sense with the cannabis. I feel like I'm already pushing the envelope a little bit.
Most folks are probably leaving them with a sitter anyway.
But yeah, and that's actually another huge advantage, because so many people are like, dude, we're so stoked that there's not going to be any kids. Like, you don't have a campground, no kids, we're there. And I get to see adults being children, like literally like having so much fun.
It reminds me of like an adult camp. It's kind of,
My next thing, I want to do a zip line so bad. I want to have.
Oh boy, do you have a place for it.
I know. It's like, I really want to do the zip line. And so there's this other thing called tree net willies, where they come out and they like make these big kind of like bungee net like rooms with like pathways and stuff. I want to do one of those to where we can sit over the river in this like net cage and just like smoke out. Like, I'm ready to like do a lot more fun, interactive hangout spots, people where they can really chill.
That sounds totally cool.
Yeah. I want to make a memory. People are coming up here to get fresh air. They're coming to get out of the city. They're coming to hike a lot. Most people who are coming are like health people concerned. They want to do a massive bike ride in the Avenue of the Giants. They want to go, they're good, hiking in the Lost Coast. They're doing all of the redwoods or whatever. And those people are outdoors. They're health conscious. They're feeling super connected because the trees just have that deep vibration. And you could just see somebody when they arrive, You know, they're like, long drive. This was, long drive, set up camp, they're like, and then by the end of it, they're like, we never want to leave. I seriously saw one guy, he was playing, I have a tetherball thing. He was just out there tetherballing. His friends were like in the car, like, come on, dude. He's like, one more time. Like, it was like, I'm sitting there just like cracking up. Like, they're like, we're not going to play you tetherball anymore. The guy was just like, didn't want to get in the car, and that to me is like,
and the laughter and the fun that people are having is one of the probably most beneficial
rewards. I look out my door, I literally hear like echoes of laughter, like people just having a good time laughing, and I also look out the door and I see people like totally in love. Like, it's a lot of couples like getting away and like going on a hike, so I wake up and and there's like people smooching, and I'm just like, yeah, this is the vibes I want surrounding my place. It's literally like an insulation of all of that, so much fear of compliance, so much like, I don't know if I'm gonna make it, I don't know, like, oh, what are we gonna do, this is so hard. And I look out my door and I see people grateful for me sharing what I'm doing with them, and just overjoyed. And like, that's the vibes I want, and that's the vibes I invite. And I learning how to invite what you want rather than leaving a space, having a fear and leaving a space to be occupied by what you don't want. It's like, I have occupied my space of the things I want to see, which is happy people in love.
That's beautiful. You mentioned another one of our bullet points here is the art of invitation and holding space.
It is that. A lot of people were very concerned about me and my daughter living on the side of the road, and people possibly being able to catch a glimpse of my plants, and a lot of people were like, I don't know, I don't think you should do this season. Are you crazy? You're inviting people to your garden. You've listed your garden on Hip Camp. You're letting strangers in. It was like,
oh boy. People
are like, oh my God, the risk you're putting yourself at. And I could have let all of that seep in, to me, and I could have been like, you know what, you're right, I should just sit and fear alone.
Well, I'd hate to be the one that makes the mistake of wandering around down there when they shouldn't. I wouldn't want to. I don't think I'd want to
and most people are really like, they get there and they know it's a cannabis garden, but still most people, and this is why I have to give permission. Like, it's okay, like, forage in the garden, go check it out, take a picture. Cool. It's like, I have to give them permission, because I do see people, there's either people who like come to tears over it, or there's people who get very, very nervous and don't even want to look at it. They're like, I don't want to be, like, they're like, oh, I'm not going in there because I don't want to be responsible, or whatever, and it's like, okay, like, fine, look at it from 20 feet away if you want.
I know that in finding out a little bit about you, that you have a different situation than I had myself in smoking. Cannabis was acceptable in your family and something that your family members would do together. My situation is completely the opposite, and I would never be able to really implement that as acceptable because of the conditioning around it. But that's been something that you felt was healthy, and not something that was done in the shadows. And
it's true. My dad was he was a person who would spark up a joint in the middle of a crowd, and really not to like provoke drama or but really just to him, he didn't feel like it was anything that needed to be hidden or that he was doing anything wrong. He really honestly didn't feel like he was doing anything wrong, and he never got arrested for it or anything. But I definitely knew that I've picked up at a very young age that wasn't normal for, that wasn't normal for one thing. When my friends would come over, it was very, I had the cool hangout house, where it was okay to smoke pot or whatever. So it was like, it was changing the stigma,
That coming into the conversation reminds me a lot of how it was difficult for people's children
and having social interaction with other kids when there was cultivation going on before it was a legal situation. And so the parents always had to have this kind of like,
Don't talk about it.
yeah, well, and the kids weren't really welcome to be having neighbor children over and so on and so forth.
I went through, there was a phase early, I remember.
There's been a shift.
I did go
that.
through that. There was one particular house that I lived in, and I fell off of a horse and got a black eye. And my school questioned me, like all of a sudden there was like an investigation. Why did I have a black eye? And I had to be like, it was, and Child Protective Services came to our house. And at that point, I remember I was in like kindergarten, first grade, like we only lived in that house for that time. And my parents sat me down and had the talk about, how some laws are for bad people, and then there's some laws that, they gave me the talk of secrecy and at that time I didn't know what was really going on at my place. I was just a kid, but there was a time that I got that talk. It wasn't always so open. And San Diego has a big cannabis culture, but it's a different cannabis culture than it is up here, San Diego, because it's a border town and stuff. Mm-hmm. So, there was definitely, cannabis has always had a very upfront and open position in our family, but I did know that it was something that I couldn't really disclose, and that there was some people I straight up had to lie to, like the people at my school.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, and
you
that...
to get any weed? No.
Yeah, right. So, yeah. And, yeah. So,
Well,
having this garden is like different, is creating a different form of access to people. Right now there's access, before it was like 215, we're giving access to medical, we're giving access to patients. It's, compassionate access, and now it's like, this is a different, people say like, how, the guy who cried, I gave him a minute, and he's trying to pull himself together. And when I came back, he's like, I'm sorry, I just lost it there for a minute. He's like, you don't know how many he's like, I've lost friends, I've lost jobs, I've had family disown me, I've had, and now people are just out here fucking camping with this plant. He was like, I couldn't tell if he was like mad about it but he was just like, so to imagine, for somebody who has experienced that in their life, to it becoming so normal that you can just book a campsite, it's like, he's like, what the hell? It happened so fast for people.
I remember having a conversation recently with somebody that I've known for, now 30 or 40 years or something, and him pointing out that, no, we knew it was going to happen. We knew we've been waiting for the longest time for this to happen. And so I'm just, my point is that there are really healthy family situations with people that are cultivators or, perhaps, have more of a corporate job in the cannabis industry. But there's been a shift where there's not this element. I think that there is still difficulty with transparency, where some couples have to kind of hide what their significant other does because of their mainstream activity. But one of my first guests couldn't come on the program and talk about things because of her professional there's still an element of there being adjustment,
and that's why I feel it's really important to normalize it. Like this, we're always looking for ways to normalize it.
I wasn't familiar that you guys have got a dispensary right there where you are.
Oh, the One Log?
Is that what it is?
So
it's right there across from the gas station at the
yeah,
grandfather
so
tree.
you've seen the One Log house forever, right? That used to be like a gift shop, for the tourist, a coffee shop. And they bought it and turned the little side room into a dispensary, which to me was a really cool example of, to me I was like, what, how'd they do that? Because for one thing, there's a church across the street. The campground behind the Patriot gas station is Assembly of God. That's they have a tabernacle. There's like a full-on church across the street.
Where the KOA was?
It's not a KOA. It's not.
It used to be.
And so it is privately owned.
Oh, interesting.
And it's owned by a church.
Maybe it was just said KOA.
Yeah, it's not,
What
KOA
is
is like a franchise,
Uh-huh.
And so you have to buy into that. The Bimbo's a KOA now.
We had fun staying over there across the street at that
During
KOA.
reggae and stuff, yeah. So I was really like, what? How cool! Like now, the cool thing about that place is that so many people have stopped there for so many years to stop and get their ice cream or coffee or whatever, and check out the One Log house. That's a age-old tourist attraction. And so how many people are like, okay, grandma, you sit over here, while the kids have ice cream, and I'm gonna go over to the next room.
I'll take whatever you got. Let me have it all.
Yes, dude. Like, talk about normalization and like making it just chill. It's like, to me, I was like, way to go, guys. That's amazing that they were able to pull that off.
Before the gas station was there was a really cool little short order cafe. It was a fun place.
Yeah, I really want to do some food stuff down there. Originally, I wanted to change my barn into a commercial kitchen and turn out. Sometimes I'm worried about talking about my ideas.
I have so many of them that like. I think the ones that'll have the best chance are the ones that I don't talk about.
Well, the thing of it is that I've gotten over the years like, oh my God, somebody implemented my idea, and I get all like, oh, burn, burn. And I've changed it to be like, you know what? I obviously had a very viable idea, and I don't have time to implement it, and look at them. They're doing a good job at it. Way to go. I've had to just not be like, oh my, and like nobody steals. I'm not the only person who thinks of these things, nobody's stealing my idea. It's like ridiculous for me to think that. It's really just that I had a good idea that somebody else thought of and made happen, and it worked. That's not a burn. That's a tip of the hat of good idea season.
I'm sure a lot of people in your area are probably more familiar with the old site at French's Camp, and is there anything that you know of that potentially could develop into that space being utilized again?
So I don't really know the ins and outs. I know that High Times gave back the name or whatever, but even when High Times was there for that last reggae, the Mateel still had the permit. The permit stays with the property, and different production companies can utilize that permit. Is how these like festivals, it's like the permits that these festivals are operating on are conditional use permits that have been around for many, many, many years and have changed several different production companies. And so I would say that the site, the biggest challenge to that site is getting the bridge in, and so it's like, it's not like that site can only be used for a certain amount of time, and it has to be built and tore down. And that is what High Times really had a hard time with, was that they had to do all of that work and then remove all of the work, and they could only have one show, and it's a really limited amount of time that bridge can be there to have access to the property. And so it's pretty, I wish I moved in when there was no festivals there, and it was sweet, peaceful. As soon as the reggae came back, which we were all rejoicing for. I mean, everybody, that's what we wanted. It was a great triumph. Yay, it's back. But I tell you, for the whole month of July, I wake up to like a tractor leveling the gravel.
Weed whacker.
Like all day long, like the entire swimming season. It's just like a construction site, and I can't complain because it's for the community, and I just have to But I remember one 4th of July, I had said oh, for sure they're not going to be working 4th of July, and I had invited my family up, invited a bunch of people. They're out there freaking, the track, and I had to call them and be like, I deserve one day of my riverfront property to enjoy the fucking river. I called them.
What, they were doing it 7 days a week or something?
They were doing it, and so they did. They stopped. They were very considerate. They responded well, and they were like, yeah, sorry, we didn't know he was out there. We'll tell him to stop. And I said, just give me to 4 o'clock. He can come back after 4 o'clock, but can I please just swim on the river on my property without, for one thing, it's can't swim naked, I just have an audience of people out there constantly, which is I just have to deal with it, and I've made my peace with it, but it's not as...
That's pretty special that you get to utilize that sacred space.
Yeah, I'm trying to keep it sacred, as much as I can, and share it with people.
I was there many of those years, and I know how sacred that land is. Now that I haven't brought this up, I forgot to mention that I remember now one of the people that I've met there on that property was a mutual friend of ours, I believe, Johnny Bruno.
Oh yeah, so Johnny is a very good friend of. I consider him a very good friend because when I first moved here, Jesse, my friend's dad, was building a house in Ruby Valley, and John was the contractor. And so we built that house, Johnny, Bruno, Jesse, and I, and we hired a couple guys for when we did the roof, to bring all the plywood up to the roof and stuff. And we hired a couple guys to do the electrical. And it took several years, but we built that house, and my sister ended up buying it. And I tell you, that was a rough first summer. And if I didn't have the positive influence and the distraction of working with Johnny Bruno, I don't know if I would have made it. I might have just packed up and left because it was not a warm reception that I got from this town, from that town.
Off screen to get us an ashtray.
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting. I thought anyway that I doubt very much that John would remember meeting me, but I do recall as his name came up that I did meet him one year. I remember
He's
him
definitely
saying that
memorable.
He was Carol's mom.
No, Carol's.
Carol was his mom. Yeah.
No,
No?
Carol. No, Carol
that
was
right?
his wife. Carol and John were husband and wife.
Oh, then
So maybe you met the
I'm-
son, because there were two sons.
Mm.
But so maybe you met his son. But Johnny is who I built the house with, and Johnny actually is coming back to help me build the bathroom. And see, this is like full circle for him. Is I started off with a building project with Johnny, and now here I am starting a new leg. I've sold the other farms have sold. Jesse is retiring and moving back to Arizona, and I'm left up here to implement my dream, which I have every opportunity to do, which I'm so grateful for. And Johnny will be the contractor to come build the bathroom and stuff. And for me to hang out with Johnny again, I'm just like so looking forward to it because he's just a ray of light. I mean, just an absolute pleasure to be around. And he, I told him, I was like, well, I'll be the worker, Johnny is the contractor, and I'll be there making the cuts and driving this, the screws. I mean, we built a house together. He's like, you're a good worker. I was like, can you handle that, Johnny? It's just going to be me again. And he's like, oh, you're a good worker. So I'm really looking forward to it.
Well, you seem to be like, I don't know, I could see you do a photo shoot or something, one of those old-timey with an old-fashioned shotgun and just being on the land. You remind me of a Wild West, real life,
Annie Oakley or something.
Yes, that's thank you. That's it. So, yeah, kind of.
I mean, I don't know.
There's an
I don't really know
element
much about
of
Annie Oakley, but
there's an element of hill life and cannabis cultivation that is very Wild West.
Well, so my dad, this is the other funny thing. It's like my dad had this property on Palomar Mountain, which is in North County, San Diego. And he was caretaker of these artesian wells. And so my dad was kind of like a hermit hillbilly who lived off grid in this like really bitchin' cabin. And I would go and spend as much time as I could up there off grid with him. And I learned how to harness. He was caretaking these artesian wells that the Arrowhead water trucks would pull up and just fill their water trucks out of these wells that he was, had to change the filters and flush them all out all the time. So we'd have to hike up to the top of this waterfall basically and like undo all of the pipes and clean, flush it all out and to where the water would come out clean and at good pressure. You
used to do that?
When I was a child, with my dad. That was his job. He was caretaker of this property, and that was his job, was to... So
Wow.
As I grew up, we would have these hippie parties up there, and people would, at that time, I was 16 when I started taking horticulture classes at the community college. And so here I was, like this young girl, with horticulture, had the internship of head grower at the college and could run the generator and harness water, and people were like, you need to go to Humboldt, like way back then, and people were trying to get, and I was like, I am not going up there to
You did drag your heels to get here, didn't you?
Yes, but I think about, damn, had I gone at that time, everything happens exactly the way it's supposed to be. I would have never had the experience of the nonprofit work and all of that, but to me, I realized once I got here, I was like, oh, it wasn't necessarily my horticulture degree. It was the fact that I could harness water and knew how to run generators. So it wasn't real.
Right.
Like, I was okay living off grid.
Well, that's great. Let's see what. Well, you know, I mean, I'm kind of. I think at a certain point we're going to have somebody up from the block. We're going to have somebody back from the Bloxburg area to kind of address, in an episode of itself, the negative connotation that the one film that's given everyone an impression of this area, the Murder Mountain thing.
I know, but honestly, to me, I'm always surprised at the takeaway that people have of that show. Like, so many of the people who come to my campground, they're like, "Where's Murder Mountain from here?" You know, they're all like, "Are we really close to Murder Mountain? Can we drive?" I'm like, "You don't want to fucking drive up there. I guarantee you, there's nothing. You know, like, don't drive. Whatever you do, don't go there." So I tell people, like, you don't.
That's so funny. My sister-in-law doesn't want my brother to come visit me because of that movie.
But it's not that. But if you think about it, this was a group of men who were righting a serious fucking wrong. Like, if your children's bones went missing, wouldn't you want somebody to make sure they were found? I mean, to me, honestly, when it was happening in real life, and we heard on on Kmar that the guy was dropped at the. So me coming from San Diego and having a lot of ties to Ocean Beach, I think that it hit home more than maybe other people in the area, you know, because this was somebody from my hometown who went missing, and a mother hysterical about it. And we lived on Alder Point.
This
we
is
were
a different
somebody
perspective I have not heard.
We were somebody from San Diego who lived on Alder Point Road, so we were a point of contact. People were calling, you know, like, "Hey, you know, like, do you know anything?" And it's like, I had no idea who that person was. I didn't knew nothing, and I'm honestly knew nothing about it. You know, like, it wasn't like I know nothing. It was like, I seriously knew nothing. I had no idea. So when it came out that the guy was dumped at the emergency room, I was like, thank God that mother, you know, finally, you know, like, to me, I was relieved, and I was pissed when those guys got in trouble for intimidating him like that. I was like, what? Like, you sheriffs didn't do your job, and now you're arresting those guys who went and did your job for you? Like, I get that vigilantism we can't really encourage. I get it. But at the same time, like, my whole perspective of that is, I would hope that somebody would do that for me if my bones went missing.
Wow, well, that really is going to encourage me to take the time to maybe watch it. And maybe I shouldn't bring it up when I'm not clear what I'm talking about, because I just understood that Netflix put this film out there that didn't quite give the area an accurate depiction.
Well, it's a small scope of some rough people. I mean, Alder Point's rough. We all know that. Palo Verde, no, that's not, you know. I remember when we were looking at a piece of property out there, the real estate guy told Jesse, "You can't leave this woman out here. Like, she's the one no, you can't leave her out here." And I was like, "My friends live at the end of the road. You don't know where I come from. I'll be fine." And he was like, you know, and I'm thinking, God, how bad is it if the real estate agent's like, you can't leave this nice girl out there. It's like, I'm fine. But I mean, maybe it wasn't. I'm glad I didn't have to drive that road out there, but I wasn't afraid of the area. It was more like, this is going to tear my truck up, you know. That was my concern.
Wow. You mentioned Palo Verde, and another I would be very comfortable calling cultural icon.
Miss Pearl Moon.
Yeah, I was really, really hopeful that maybe you could share with me, because I don't know, and I guess you encouraged people to help her through a recent hip or something.
Yeah, she fell and broke her pelvis.
Ouch.
Yeah, that's a big bone.
And
there's nothing you can do to heal that, you know, other than like sit still. That's tough.
When I asked about that, and who may have been an influence to you becoming a cultivator, I think that...
Well, I was a cultivator. You know, I met Pearl, and I became close with Pearl only really in the last, 3 or 4 years, and I was definitely I was a cultivator before I was a cannabis cultivator. You know, I come from an ornamental horticulture family back, and that was what my background, you know, educational background is in. So for me, you know, I knew I had my path, but meeting Pearl, she is just an authentic woman who has held her own in that space and has done, you know, one of the Bud Sisters salve was like one of the first like branded cannabis products I was ever, you know, to me I was like, wow, she's got her own sticker on a jar. You know, like I was like, go Pearl. You know, Pearl and Joyce, like they were regulars at the Emerald Cup always. You know, like to me, I could just tell they had a lot of respect, and they were just like stoic women who really enjoyed each other's company. Forever I thought they were a couple. They're not. They're just good friends who hang out all the time.
Well, do you think it'd be okay with them if I include some pictures?
Oh yeah, Pearl definitely wants her picture up.
Okay, great.
She's, you know, and she.
Well, I could just tell that she's somebody that has so much history, and I personally want to help preserve the culture and heritage of.
Well, and
cultivation.
it makes me like I said, when the campers come and they look at me like I'm a mystical unicorn, or like I've been called, like somebody wanted me to do their like phone-in podcast, you know, and they're like, I want to talk to an OG of Southern Humboldt. I'm like, not me. Let me get you someone else's number, you know, like that. I don't think you're talking to, like, I don't consider myself that at all. And I want to be sure, I see like history being rewritten, and already that I want to be sure that if I have the opportunity to be like, hey, that's not me. There's a whole generation of badass hippies way before me, and they're the ones who paved the way. Like, I may have a pre-existing cultivation permit of Humboldt County, but I'm not, you know, like, there's people who were doing it many, many, many generations before me, and I'm not that person, and I don't claim to be that person, you know, like, I'm happy to be where I'm at, and I'm there because of people like Pearl.
And she was cultivating in the 70s?
No, actually, she actually came in the 90s to that property. So, you know, but she already came with the type of grit that it takes to succeed there. You know, you don't show up to a place like that soft, you know, and be there as long as she has, and made the friends that she's had, and become an Emerald Cup judge, and have a you know, a product. And she, I mean, that was, she's ahead of her time, you know, and I don't like to see her be left behind or forgotten, you know, any of that generation. I really don't want to see it.
I think that's what I sensed when I saw, I don't know, I just, before we were recording this, I have skimmed over the comments in some of your posts and learned so much that I think that it's really great to give the recognition.
Definitely.
Well, because, and I've been thinking about it too. I liked your idea of circulating with attitude, or I think you might be right about adjusting the lurking part. Only it's not as pro as I want it to be. I mean, I've had some other ideas.
Lurking has some bad connotations to it.
Yeah, and it's come from the OG that I've come through since I've been through. It's personal
to you. It's an inside
since
joke
'93,
yeah.
and somebody that's passed on is the one that coined that phrase, and so it's been great. It might be a thing that the first season honored Tro at the bottom of my website, 420lwa.com.
What's the LWA for?
Lurking with attitude.
Okay, got it. Yeah, no, that makes. I could have thought about that for 2 seconds longer.
But that's obviously a play on it anyway. In episode 13, and when Billy Nathan is here, we give homage to Tro, and his mom actually was.
So there is a background. There is.
You do give a background, and yet
but
we have done Lurking with Attitude for a full season of 16 episodes, and it has gotten to a point that I could have never hoped or dreamed to have had
well, then
go
maybe
as well
don't
as that.
doubt it.
Well, it could also be, gratitude with attitude.
There you go.
Latitude with attitude. I've just been thinking about kind of keeping the attitude thing
is something that I enjoy having be a part of it, because that doesn't mean bad attitude.
Yeah.
It can mean attitude. Everybody that's
Oh yeah, I have tons of attitude, and that's the thing.
We all do. That's
I
why
have so much attitude
my
that
mom
people
even
are like, no, not that girl. She has too much attitude. Sometimes.
Well,
Sometimes.
yeah, and
No,
what
I
do we
realize,
do with
like,
our
I'm just-
attitude? A lot
I'm
of
just
times
being
we lurk with
myself.
attitude.
Yeah, well,
and
I've definitely been that. So I mean, to me, because I have so much attitude that I'm like, oh yeah, I get that, because I've definitely done
well,
that
and
before.
it's so
I've
funny.
definitely
I've
been
had
over there like,
I mean, it was great that you
no,
asked me if
no.
I've had any feedback about using lurking, because in thinking about that, I mean, it can be, and I do want to do a 2.0 version of this, going out and doing remote farm
Well,
tours.
and that's why I said the
and
circulating. Like when you're out
Circulating
doing,
with
when you're out
attitude.
there like doing the remote ones, that one could be the circulating. But at the same time, maybe I don't know.
Well, because I like this, because it does
What about
get
winning with attitude?
winning. All I do is win, no matter what. Like, I'm so
Okay.
proud of myself having people such as yourself come and be willing to share this and turn it into a platform that's actually gaining some viability.
Yeah, I think the more people see other people's story, they want to say their story too. Also, it's now become so much more relaxed. It's not something that you have to hide your face as much anymore. It's like people aren't necessarily feeling like as uptight about incriminating themselves, as maybe they had in the past. And maybe I'm naive about that. Still, I mean, maybe I don't want to give anybody any bad advice, but I feel like when I first saw the compliance happen, we definitely wanted to get like stories of the OGs, like before. We want to hear stories of the black market. We want to hear, like the time that time frame before compliance, because after compliance, everything went fucking vanilla. It's just like a bunch of Chads and Brads and people or whatever. It's like, like we want to hear from the people with grit, and they were like, hell no, I'm not going on camera. I'm not telling my story like hell. And it comes from that secretive, like, you don't fucking talk about it forever. I mean, that's like the code. That is the code that allowed us to get here. And it's a hard transition to make, but I feel like enough time has passed that people are ready to say their story. And what you're doing is actually creating a historical archive.
And that's where I'm saying that I am really realizing this has turned into a bigger thing than I had first intent for. I like the idea of having a community hub, such as I see people such as Chris Anderson at the Redwood Roots family and what he does for the community, but that's been the type of inspiration that's given me the incentive to want to be a part of bridging connections and implementing more cooperation and collective collaborations, and hopeful to see things bridge and connect with people that may have not, or be a part of that occurring, as that is what seemingly to me cumulatively the community and the cannabis industry is all encouraging one another, that one farm wins, all farms win, and that there's I think it would be interesting to investigate how it has affected people that haven't been able to get through compliance. I know this year in southern Humboldt in the fire season, they weren't able to get to their properties without the proper day permits. And
Yeah, it's rough. Believe me, it's not that great of a feeling to receive a grant while other people are being abated. Like that's a hard pill for me to swallow, and that's why I haven't really celebrated or rejoiced too publicly. Like this is I've learned not to talk about it, because it strikes a chord, because people are still really suffering, and that's why I know I deserve it. I competed for it. I know that I'm community minded with the money. This is not just to promote my brand. This is to promote an association. It's to promote a region. It's to educate on farming practices that can be utilized on any crop. It's for me, it's like I'm hoping I'm doing a really doing the award justice, but at the same time, it's hard to feel good about collecting that money while other people are being abated. And I'm empathetic and conscious enough to know that it's not something to gloat over, and like just talking about it with you today, I'm conscious about the emotions that it can stir with people, and I understand when people have a hard time being happy for me. I don't blame them.
True.
I don't get mad about that. And I've definitely received some of that feedback, and I have to know that there's a lot of people who have suffered through this, and and I'm very, very, very unique and grateful.
This brings me to another thing that was a bullet point on the notes here, is Southern Humboldt Values.
Yeah, and that was an actual conference that was put on by a community member who has an economics degree and is a pillar of our community, who's the second, I don't know how many generations he's lived there. And he actually held an event at the Mateel asking the community to come in and define what are the values of Southern Humboldt. Like, what do we want to be known for? If this industry, if we're going to be on the map. It was kind of maybe also a backlash to Murder Mountain, possibly, like, oh no, like, kind of like, that's not what we're known for. Those aren't our values, like, we're more than that.
I think that's why I've had an attitude about that movie.
Yeah.
And if somebody says something, I mean,
there were good people on there too, because like my daughter's ballet teacher's on there, Doug Furr's on there. I mean, there are like, I'm pretty sure Thomas Mulder's on there. Like, I know that the Humboldt Cure guy. I mean, there's totally great people on there who weren't of that little backwoods clan of vigilantes. There are other people trying to represent. But either way, it's like, so the values were outlined and defined by the community at a community event by a community leader. And I mean, it was a collaborative effort. And to me, to witness that somebody had the idea that we need to outline those values, somebody took the time to rent a building, and you know how hard it is to facilitate a bunch of stoner hippies to get a cohesive a couple paragraph statement,
herding cats or
it's
something.
It's like, oh my God. I mean, that's partly why I go to these community meetings, because it is just like a lesson in patience, and like, you just gotta like love how wacky we are because it just sometimes, you just hear like the cutest stuff, or like, people are just so precious. Every individual is so precious. But so, I mean, those Southern Humboldt values were outlined. I'm not certainly claiming that I'm setting those values. I just want to honor those values that were defined. And honestly, like, as I'm saying that, I'm like, shit, what were they, like, what were they defined?
Well, it's
was
a testament to the medication that you brought with you. Let me tell you that.
Responsible resource management. I know environmental consciousness, small farms, small, family-owned businesses. Like people are amazed when they come up and they're like, "What? You don't have a Rite Aid?" They're like, "You don't have a drugstore?" They're like, "Oh my God!" Like people are really surprised when they get up. That's like the one thing they get to my place. Where can I go to? Where's the CVS?
You're like, well, Willits.
Yeah, like, oh shit, yeah.
Ukiah, maybe,
like, I
don't know.
They're like, just they can't imagine a community without, a drugstore. I'm like, yeah, we have no franchise. Those are all, they just can't even.
You have to go up to Arcata for that.
Yeah, they can't even believe it. They honestly are like, how do you live? It's like, so I mean, to be able to maintain that type of, individual small, owned businesses, that's a really unique situation in this day and age, and this is a community of people who are not sellouts. These are people who believe in preserving their values, who believe in being able to keep their own community sustained, and we're struggling at it, but we're doing it.
Well, and the more things go the way that they are going, the more of a commodity or a rarity that is. And another one of our bullet points is the economy of the tourism with cannabis and
The eco tourist. Yeah. I mean, that's what we have to attract people to spend money in our boutique stores. You know, it's like that is people are coming, you know, passing through Southern Humboldt, and they are either going to, you know, HSU, they're going up, you know, to the beaches, to Trinidad. I mean, we need to really, the Avenue of the Giants is on the north end, you know, where Garberville and Redway, like people could pass right through there, and oftentimes they get off the freeway and they're like, yikes, we're getting back on the freeway, you know, like we are passing. So it's like for us, we need to know how to cater to the eco tourists, because that's our biggest asset above and beyond, and has been our constant asset beyond cannabis. And now we have, what I'm learning is that the people who want to get back to nature, who want to unplug, who want to sit with a tree, those people are usually pretty cool with cannabis. You know, like those people got to that point that they want to do those things because they've been smoking cannabis at some point.
Okay,
So
gotcha.
when I can offer, like they're like coming to camp in my yard, I'm like, oh yeah, by the way, it's a cool pot farm. They're like, oh, dream come true, bonus, like I can't even believe this. And now it's like that is part of the holistic experience of health and wellness. That is part of getting back to nature. That is part of, you know, finding source. That is part of being comfortable in silence. That's part, you know, like now all of a sudden, like these people who are seeking this, you know, this little escape from their everyday, you know, 9-to-5 job in the city and freeways and all that, they're running, you know, now they can have a very holistic experience of seeing this plant as part of that trip up to our area. And that I think is gonna help bring people here.
Do you foresee more of the permits, like you said, somebody received here in the last few weeks, being administered? Or
I hope so. I mean, I want to be the next person. I know that there's another farm who's really in line to receive it. And I mean, I really think that it's a big missed opportunity that the county has really dragged their feet on. And I know that I've been hoping for a way and looking and finding ways to do what I want to do without them giving me the permit. You know, like I am trying to be a pilot program, and I have set an example that they can see and watch. I'm being open about it. You know, I'm not, and I would love to pay them for the permit. I would love, you know, I do pay the bed tax. And so with the hip camp thing. So, I mean, they are, and that's how I know that they know I'm doing this. You know, it's like, you can't collect that tax and then tell me I can't do it. You know, so, so it's like, for me, you know, I want to see it become really accessible. I want to see it become like a wine tour. You know, like people
Sure.
go on wine tours. People spend a lot of money going on wine tours. This is just, you know, it's even better than a wine tour because wine's not good, you know, as good for you.
Let's see. Let me find my fancy blue cards here.
Very legit.
I know, right? I think we're getting close to talking about everything. There's one other one that I mentioned in the promotion for this as being my favorite, but and I think it's in your approach and with your intent, but unconditional love.
Yeah. For me, you know, the fifth sister, okay, so we have our adopted sister who was a little girl from down the road who was older
Who became
than me.
the fifth sister?
No, she's the fourth sister. And
That's Amber, right?
that's
Okay.
Amber. And that was our family accepting someone outside of our family and loving her and her loving us. And then the fifth sister is the female plant, and that holds the space for like all the females in the cannabis and all the women that are contributing and being business owners. That I call that like the fifth sister, the female plant, the sisterhood of unconditional love. But the way that I've implemented the unconditional love is opening my farm to people who want to see it, to making myself available and present for those people who want to visit, and giving them, listening to what they want to take from the experience, and not necessarily pushing my agenda or pushing my ethics or pushing, I just let them come and be and visit. And then at that time, they conjure up their own thoughts and their own questions to me. And then I make myself available for them to take away whatever they want, instead of the approach of making a commercial and trying to sell my product. It's like I'm actually just allowing them to come, no judgment, and I think one of the biggest, I had two really profound experiences with my hip camp people this year. When the George Floyd riots were happening in Portland, a lot of people were mobilizing from Oakland, and I had this one group of some of the youngest people I've hosted who were super amped and super angry when they got there. They came late. They, and I couldn't tell if it was maybe they just came late, they had a hard time getting there, And then the next morning, they had some questions. I walked them around. I needed to show them how to use the shower. And after speaking with them, I set them up with some food to take with them. They said, I'm so happy we stopped here because we were so ready to fight. We were in fight mode, and stopping here is an example of acceptance and welcome. Like people just and we're ready to approach that situation with love. I mean, that to me, I was just like, damn, like I didn't expect, I thought I was just showing you the shower, but here's a group of people huddling they're getting their mindset to go into what at that time they thought was a riot, it was a protest, riot, whatever. And they were, ready. They were like, we were ready to fight, and now we can go. And like, they were able to go into that with a little, it diffused them was kind of the word I think she used. The other one I had, there was a group of grad students, and I was talking to them. They were like, what is, why are so many different plants? Like, is there a reason? Is this just is it to be pretty, or, like, what are these flowers doing here? And I showed them, like, oh, this flower, attracts beneficial insects. It's flat. They can land on it. It has pollen, showed them all the different things. This one does this one. And they were like, well, so I was explaining to them polyculture, and I said it's really eliminated. A lot of people think, oh, you have so much extra foliage that's going to bring bugs, but really it's actually eliminated my need to spray pesticides because it hosts beneficial insects. It calls them in. It's a trap crop. It's, like having this polyculture, having the diversity actually eliminated my need to spray pesticides. And she's like, well, that concept could be applied to, that's a microcosm. It could be a macrocosm that if we encourage diversity, we wouldn't have to have like combative methods. Like my microcosm of having polyculture and creating diversity has eliminated my need to combat the insects, the pests, the bad stuff. And these were like young people, and I'm so like just in my garden, like, and I'm like mind blown.
Right, what a metaphor. I mean, my goodness.
And I mean, like that one really brought me to tears. Like both of those moments, really just like kind of like hit me to my core. And like that, I guarantee I'm never going to have that conversation with some guy at the Emerald Cup at a weed booth.
Sure.
Like that's never, it's like right. so like it's flat there. There's like honestly, maybe I'm not getting what I'm supposed to from those.
What she was observing, is that what you would consider regenerative farming practice?
Okay. Well, because polyculture is part of regenerative farming practices. Really, it's the closed loop. Regenerative means, there's sustainable, which is you're going to just keep your land inputs and outputs the same, and it's just going to sustain itself. Regenerative is actually creating more organic matter. It's actually like remediating and putting it back to even richer, adding more biodiversity, adding more native plants, if you look at my Instagram, you can see from when I started with the flat and to what it is now, just with wood chips and letting things go to seed and reseed themselves. I mean, I barely have to do anything to my garden anymore. I hardly even have to plant. I mean, I plant the cannabis, of course, but all of my companion plants reseed themselves. Right now, I have.
Amazing.
I just went out. I wanted to make a post today about it, but I didn't really take good enough pictures. I decided I wanted to take somewhere. I like cilantro, my nasturtiums. All the poppies are coming up. Like, I don't have to sow those seeds anymore. That garden is, I allow the plant to go to seed and leave it standing and let those seeds drop. And that's the no-till part. If I had tilled that ground, I would not have a carpet of 20 different plants coming up. And right now it's like, by, a month from now, I'm going to have a cover crop of cilantro, alyssum, California poppy, the red Papaver somniferum, calendula is all coming up. Like, I don't have to plant anything anymore. It literally regenerates itself.
Cool.
So it's like, that's the difference. No-till regenerative is that you let it regenerate itself. I'm laying my plant sticks, I'm like laying them in the hugels. I like seriously chop it and like lay it right where it is. I leave the roots in the ground. I mean, it's just building. My soil's just getting thicker and thicker and thicker.
Well, and I heard in another interview you mentioned bringing soil from your previous location to your current
that
location.
Was more out of the person. That I did not want to do that, but I was glad I did. At the time I was like, thought it was kind of spiteful taking the soil with us. I was like, this is fucking ridiculous. And I had to take it by 5-gallon buckets, dude. It was like hell to move that soil. Like, and now I'm like, oh, I earned, like, it was bad moving all that soil.
Was it soil that you felt
it was soil
important
I
to bring
crafted,
with
but
you?
it was also just like us moving from the one property and Jesse being like, we're not leaving our fucking soil here, we're taking our soil with us. And I'm just like, really, we are? Like, oh my god, like how I had to like bucket it up a hill.
And you didn't want to?
I mean, at the time, no, I was pissed.
Oh, I figured it was some ingenious method of farming that you wanted to practice.
No, I mean, no, you should definitely not leave big fucking holes in people's yard. No, to me, I was mad about it. But it sat in my yard for years and years, and I covered it, and we had weeds. Once the weeds started growing, I was like, oh, I'm going to cover it with a cover crop so the weeds don't grow on it, because I can't be introducing weed seed. And so I mean, I managed it a little bit, but it wasn't that intentional. Now I'm super grateful that I had it, and I look at that soil and I'm like, baby, we've been through so much. I carried you by bucket. I'm out there like,
and
I'm so glad you're still. Yeah,
I
know. It's like literally.
And it's got to have some sort of reproductive influence on what's
this is
being
the thing
utilized.
that people notice about my garden, and I think that the way that it's terraced, my yard is terraced. I have a lot of land mass kind of above me, and so I have like Highway 101 above me. I'm on like this little bluff, and then the riverbed below me, and that somehow creates like a little banana belt to where people are super amazed. Like right now I have zinnias, haven't froze. I have some peppers that froze. I have, like I said, like nasturtiums popping up. I have some nasturtiums that didn't even freeze back at all in full bloom. Here, you need a lighter.
Oh, here, I found one.
Okay.
Thanks.
So I feel like people are like, is this a super protected little spot? Or, and sometimes I'm like, I think it has something to do with my soil. It's like my plants are super resilient to wind and no water. Like, there's been times like if you come to my place in like August and they're setting buds and it's 3:00 in the afternoon, people are like, oh my god, girl, you need to water your plants, and it's because they've put on so much veg, they're transitioning, and the wind has been blowing, the wind starts kicking up, it's hot, and I've already started cutting back the water. And so every day they flag, every day my plants are like, oh, and then by like 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock in the afternoon, like, you know, the sun goes away. They're like, bink, all back again. And so people have come and like, Susan, you need to water your plants like now. And I'm like, and I'm like, they're fine, you know. And sometimes I think because I kind of harden, like my plants are super resilient. And I don't baby them as much as people think I should, maybe.
And that drier form of farming is referred to.
I mean, there's dry farming, and that's a different method than I use, because they use no water, and that's, to me, they're on an alluvial floodplain to where the taproot goes down. I don't have that taproot hitting a floodplain underneath, because I'm up on a little bluff made of riprap. Like the guy who lived there before me, he was a heavy equipment operator, and they actually made that flat to put a band and have like a big party up there. And so they made like a nose on the flat, and it's just literally like riprap, which is like the big stuff that they use on the side of the road, like just blocks. And so with gravel on top. So that's another reason why I made my hugel mounds up rather than, some people do hugel culture and they dig a trench and they put it in the ground, that actually saves a lot more water. You know, it's like, it's like a trough and it collects a lot more water. I have a slope above me and my flat is like this. So when I do my hugel mounds on the edge, it kind of acts like a bio remediator. It catches any runoff, but it also catches all the runoff of the rain. So those things are like soaking up like a sponge right now. Like I stick my hand into my hugel mound, it's like mud in there, and I'm constantly covering it with either the green, the green mulch of the living mulch, or hay, just tons of leaves, tons of hay. I'm trying to trap that water in that sponge of the hugel mound. And so I really believe that is what allows my plants to live on such little amount of water. I'm just not afraid to see them wilt for a couple hours in the afternoon. It doesn't put me into panic mode.
Oh, that's good.
And that comes from my greenhouse plant production background. Is you do harden off, you flag stuff. When you baby a plant, it actually calls pests. It's like when you have soft, stretched internodes because you fertilized it and you watered it, and it, it's like and that soft tissue, you're gonna get covered in aphids. It's like plants don't. Piercing, sucking insects don't even want to hit my plants because my cells walls are so tough that they're like, I can't even stick my mouth instrument in that plant. So they're like moving on. It's like that. Interesting.
That's fascinating.
Yeah, it's like, I spray silica tea from horsetail. I'm out there gathering my own inputs. People are like, what are you doing? It looks like I'm just like out there pulling weeds. They don't realize like, oh, I'm about to make tea. I'm about to put this in a bucket. People are just like kind of watching me like, I don't know what that girl's doing.
You're actually like almost, it seems to me, when you were at least describing sticking your hands in the earth, I see you becoming one with Mother Earth and encompassing what I'm sure you would consider the divine feminine.
So my mom named me Season because of the cycles. It's the relation of the cosmos to Earth. We have our orbit, and we have the rotation, orientation to the sun. That's what creates the season. So I knew that I had like a cosmic connection to the Earth. To me, it was from a very, very young age growing up with that name, and my mom telling me that's a lot for a child to think about, and so I've carried that with me, and it's been very natural for me to always be in a garden and to know the botanical names of plants. I knew the botanical names of plants when I was a teenager because my mom knew. It was like it was normal for I felt very comfortable. I had felt more comfortable with plants than I did with people, for sure. So I would retreat and I'd be like, I know these plants. I know the botanical name. I know what they want. I know what they're asking for. Like, me and plants, we know each other. I don't relate to people that well.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, that's, from a teenager, I was like, I'll be over here.
But you've had an interesting...
now I'm with people.
Yeah, and you've always apparently found yourself near rivers, I saw.
Yeah, every house I've ever lived at as an adult has been on a river, not by choice, not by seeking it out, it's just happens to be that. And it actually took me, I think it was my daughter who pointed it out. Somebody else was like, "You've lived on a river," or maybe it was my mom, because that sounds like something she would say, like, you've always lived on a river. Think about it. Well, Sissa, what color? I was like, oh my God, I have. And I don't know, that probably my connection to water probably stemmed from my dad's caretaking of those artesian wells. I would think that's probably where it comes from. And it's just stuck with me, and I respect it very much, and I understand how special it is to live on a river. You hear so many songs, take me to the river, like wash my sins, it's like there is some spiritual connection, baptisms, there is a spiritual connection to rivers. And, you put your feet in the water and you let the water, oxygenated water that's come through the gravel and you put your feet in there, and that is like a negative ion detox.
I would have to say I couldn't see otherwise, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, that is literally pulling toxins out of your body, and that, it's like
I
super
want to go
grounding.
to the river now.
Yeah, it's come up quite a bit, but we can
That's
use
great.
a lot
So
more rain.
you just have a path down to the trail down to the river right there where you are.
Yeah.
And I'm familiar with it.
I mean, yeah, it's the swim spots of reggae on the river. So many people. I had a workshop with Chris Dyer, and one of the guys who came, I take him down there, and he's kind of walked away from the group, and he's kneeling down, and it looked like he was crying, and so I give him a minute, and I go over, and I'm like, "Are you okay?" I really thought that maybe he decided he didn't want to be at the workshop anymore. Like maybe he felt like, I didn't know what I just needed to check in. There's somebody here. They've only been here for 5 hours, and he's walked away, and he's, and he's like, oh my God, like basically it was like the first place he had ever had a psychedelic experience through reggae. He was like, I had my first psychedelic, like religious experience right here, like on the beach that I took him to. Like he was
it
like,
was something else.
Yeah, he was like, I had no idea that the workshop I was coming to was here on this. I mean, he was like, I cannot believe I'm here again.
Nice.
And I was just so relieved that that's what he was upset about, or that was the experience he was having, and he wasn't upset. I was like, oh, thank God. And all I could say was like, welcome home, and give him a big hug. I mean, that was, oh, okay, welcome home. Big hug. That's it. That was all I needed to do. Everything was fine after that.
Well, it was certainly something special each time that I was there at French's camp, and there was the biannual Electric on the Eels that would roll in the weekend after. I think reggae would close down, and BGP would show up, and a bunch of hippies didn't go too far for a week there between, and it's always been a place that oh geez, what memories I've got. I actually started doing streams and stuff on the internet this year in the summertime when I was recalling. I just wanted to do a little testimony about while I was listening to Kmar and thinking about the years. 1 year Alpha Blondie couldn't find the venue and didn't hit the stage till nearly 1:30 a.m. and played all night, it seemed like, and man, there was just so much great spiritual heaven on earth experiences there every year. It was, of course, like Christmas for us here in Humboldt.
Yeah, and for me to keep that vibration going, I mean, Northern Nights does it too. That it's obviously has an energy of gathering space there because it's been that for so long. And for me to play a really small part in it and to keep letting people have a personal experience rather than a festival experience, in the area, it's a great honor for me, and I look at it as like an honor and a responsibility less than a business. I'm just super stoked it makes money somehow too. It's like, well, dang, I surprise myself sometimes.
I really feel like that being how you've become a steward for that space, that no one else would really have the unconditional love and intent that you have behind all of this. And I think that you're certainly benefiting the community by expanding awareness of these things that we've talked about, and encouraging the growth of the ecotourism of cannabis. Let's see, I guess. Yeah, go ahead.
There's just a lot being composed. The story is being written like right in front of us, about people who are entering this industry and now all of a sudden are experts, or people. And I think it's really important to archive the oral history of this area, and I'm not the person to do that, but I see that in the future, being the first Trellis Grant recipient, there's a historical value to that, and I'm just really grateful.
What kind of advice or encouragement do you have to have other people follow suit? What other requirements and is it based on a need, or
it's based on how well you can articulate your project and how viable. See, people misunderstand it as it being like, oh, you're needy, and this is a handout. Really, you have to compete and you have to prove that you're viable in order for them to give you the money. It's not an investment for them. They are giving you the money, and they're not going to give it to somebody who doesn't seem like they have a chance. Like they're it's not to help people out of the gutter or whatever. It really is. It's like it could be as small as like, I want to put my water system on solar panels. I need to do drip. I'm tired of, or I need water tanks. I'm applying again for water tanks this year, and as the individual, not as the association one. But somebody in my association is applying for the association one. See, that's the thing. Like, once I've won this with the association, we have jumped through the hoops that are needed now and every person, every cultivator in my association can now apply as the association. So between all of us, that's a good chance. There's not that, it got kind of a bad rap. So they were saying like, there's really not that many people applying for it this year. It's like old news. Like, it came out, had a bump in the road, and people are like, or I don't want to look like I need a handout. Like, that's stupid. Even the rich people take free money. It's like, you don't have to be, in a bad position to take money.
But it's designed for primarily exactly what you're doing, which is to upgrade your facility to be able to accommodate the needs to benefit the
community.
Greater good.
Yeah. Well, but the individual one is like straight up, I need more water tanks, and that's going to help me stay alive. I mean, it doesn't have to be some kumbaya, like, bigger picture, it could be specific. It could say, like, I want to do a marketing campaign. It could be, I need, a label maker. People should be buying their own label printers so they can be sticking their own jars. I mean, as cultivators, we're allowed to process our own. Fucking jar it. Like, those label printers are $5,000. Ask for a grant for one of those. It's like, it can be, it doesn't have to be some big community minded kumbaya project. It can be completely self-serving. And there's no shame in that. And you don't have to be ashamed in winning a grant. That's a point of pride. I'm hesitant to talk about it only because of the hurt that's in the community with the abatements. That's why I don't talk about it that much. But it's not because I'm ashamed at all.
Well, I think I contacted you guys as a result of seeing the recipients listed
and the redheaded black belt, or which one? Where did you see it?
I saw it. I think I saw it on
Facebook.
Yeah, no, I did see it on Instagram, and I think it was through your sister Chelsea.
Okay.
But somehow I remember tracking it, and it had her phone number wherever
That must be like the Five Sisters Farm Facebook thing. Chelsea does a lot of that stuff, and I'm really grateful that she does. So she's doing a good job, because look what happened.
I know. Well, that's why she was on her way out of town for a few weeks, I think she was saying, and told me to contact you, and that you had had the experience that you've had having some other interviews and so forth. I'm so grateful to come and speak with us, and give me a closure to this season with a visit with Season.
That was
I know.
great
It was-
marketing on your part.
I know. I've got a couple of small gifts for you. Here's a nice little wall hanging for you there.
Wait a minute, it's your birthday. You're not supposed to...
We haven't mentioned that part yet. Happy birthday to me.
Yeah, it's your birthday.
I know, but still, you get every. That's not all. That's not all. You also get a clap on, clap off, clapper.
Oh my god, I gave my daughter one of these a few years ago, and she was like, seriously, like, could not believe that this existed. It would like blew her, like, she had never heard of it. It was like to see.
It's coming back full circle.
To see.
Now you have one.
This is good because, for one thing, you scare the cat off the bed and turn off the light at the same time. You go to bed.
Great. Well, I sure appreciate you coming and being a guest and such a great subject expert.
Oh, well, I don't, I'm not quite comfortable with the expert part because I love to
I
learn.
call all my special guest subject experts.
Okay,
You're
great.
one too.
Okay, great. I have fun doing what I do. So much fun I can keep doing it.
A Camp High sticker to take back to
This is perfect for my my campground.
I know. That's why I'm giving it to you.
You can be a Camp High instructor.
Oh, I'm a counselor at Camp High. Yes,
That's what I do. So yeah, that's the next thing. I'm trying to plan some like weekend activities for when people come up. I realize like that's what they want.
I
They want
the
me to be
idea
that
of
character.
Expanding and like I could see, wait, in a few years there'll be an obstacle course and
Zip line, man.
zip line. That sounds rad.
That's what I really want. Yeah, tetherball. That was so cheap. People love it.
Oh yeah, that's a great
It's
idea.
like an old school game. Like their faces, you just see. I see adults like turn into children all around me.
I don't know where to find one. Now I do.
Tetherball.
Are you? Is there going to be a fire walk there down there? You're going to do for the solstice?
I'm walking on coals, and I'm burning all the things that I don't want to take with me into the next year, and that's my intention. And that's why I'm walking on those coals. Hey, I've done so much. Why not walk on coals? Why not?
Wow.
Not scared. I swam with alligators.
Season Georgia, everybody.
Florida, swimming with alligators. This time, walking on fire.
Wow, that's amazing. Oh, I also, before we go, want to thank New World Water. That's our show sponsor.
Oh, really? I
Yeah.
was checking that out. It's beautiful.
Did you want any water?
Yeah, I do actually. That is beautiful.
And I want to thank everybody who's been here this season for me. I have had so many great guests. There's so many people to thank, to go through a list of them. There was Chronic Charlie and Matt McCosco and James Millis and Ian from the Water Store was here. Who else have we had? We had Nick Erickson from Full Moon Farms and Carl Wilson from Flor de Vida and Billy Nathan from Golden State Chronic and Lantern Farms of Mendocino. And then lately we've had this succession of these incredible women in the industry. We had Lindsay Jones from Aloha Humboldt, and then Lindsay Renner and Chanel from Humboldt Farm and Humboldt Native and Native Farms, and now you here from Five Sisters Farms. This has made a very successful first attempt at a show of this manner, and what the 2.0 version of that will be yet to be seen, but I'm sure excited for next year. I think that everything's going to upscale. I see upgrades happening for all of us. I think that there's a very positive transformation occurring.
You gotta believe that. You have to believe it for it to happen.
It's seemingly so real that I would feel negligent not to acknowledge it, and I only find myself in a situation to have the acceptance and surrender, that everything is going to be just fine, and for us to find focus and stay calm.
It's actually very brave to surrender. You have to have bravery to to actually surrender and just accept. So
Well, I can't tell you what a courageous approach you have, and thank you for sharing that with us. And I think that there's a whole nother year coming, and there will be plenty of more lurking and circulating and gratitude with attitude. And I'm going to do a special New Year's show, a little bonus thing for the end of the year with a local Grateful Dead cover band, Steelhead. And that's going to be fun. That'll be a 2-hour episode as well. So thank you very much for being here.
thank you for having me.
And I want to thank anyone and everyone who has supported what I'm doing. And thanks for sharing all of this valuable information and unconditional love. And until we see one another again, stay tuned.